We come from everywhere in America. You know who these people are. You just may not know them by name. They're the people that bag your groceries. That kid that's bagging your groceries today could be an Army Ranger in a year, could be a Navy SEAL, could be a fighter pilot. We don't come from some secret camp that's underground in Appalachia where they hatch people that are going to be serving their country in incredible ways. We're just people that are passionate about providing freedom to the rest of us, even if it's not thanked or fully realized.
I don't know that anybody could properly use the right words to describe Mark. He was my youngest child and always had amazing sense of humor. Any of his teammates that you talked to or people that knew him just said he always kept us in stitches, in laughter, you know, even the night before his final mission. He's supposed to be a tough macho guy, and yet the compassion, the huge heart that he had. And I think that's reflected in his last letter home. He wrote this letter 2 weeks before he was killed that literally has impacted millions of people around the world. And he said, when's the last time you paid for a stranger's cup of coffee or a meal? Or can you imagine when you go to pay for something and find out it's paid for? And he ends that letter and he says, to my family and friends, do me a favor. Pass on the kindness, the love, the precious gift of human life. And I think that also shows who Mark was, how much he valued life, how much he valued the people that were in his life, and enough that he was willing to sacrifice his life to give his teammates the gift of life. My name is Debbie Lee, and I'm the very proud mother of Mark Allen Lee, the first Navy SEAL killed in Iraq.
I was on pre-deployment leave, meaning I was on a scheduled deployments leave period that you take a week or two off before you go away for 6 months. And I was on that leave period on 9/11, so I was already scheduled to go on a deployment for 6 months.
Everybody can tell you where they were. You know, they might not be able to tell you exactly what they were doing, but everybody has an impression of where they were and what they were feeling.
I was at school. I had just started school. I'd left the SEAL teams in August to start a commissioning program. I was at ODU, and I was actually leaving class at that time. I'd had my first class of the day, and I was in the student center, and I was getting a cup of coffee.
I was staying with my brother, and I was sleeping in a little bit later than usual for me. My brother was working construction, and he called me. And we were in the Midwest, and he called me and said, hey, you need to turn the TV on. There's something going on. An airplane just flew into the World Trade Center.
And I'll never forget it. The young kid behind the counter hands me my coffee, and he's kind of nervously laughing. He says, man, the world's coming to an end. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said that the Pentagon was on fire and a plane had crashed into the World Trade Center.
You kept saying it. This can't be real, but it was real.
And by the volume of smoke and stuff, I thought, well, it's not a small airplane, but you know, the first reports kind of said it was.
You thought you were in a movie scene.
I just remember that moment. It was like a cold ice pick to my heart.
I was watching when the second plane hit, and the moment that second plane hit, to me, I knew for sure we were at war.
And I just thought in that moment, I said, we're at war. I said, this is no accident. This is an intentional act.
I remember sitting there going, I can't believe what I saw.
And I picked up the phone and called the command and said, hey, what does it mean? What do you need me to do? And they were all stunned. They're like, well, we're watching it too. We don't know. Just stand by.
One of the worst terror attacks that we ever faced, besides Pearl Harbor, as a country.
It was tough being in school watching all that happen. As friends were going off to combat and we started losing friends. And who would know that, you know, almost 10 years later, I'd find myself not only in combat, but in intense combat and on the receiving end of a enemy machine gun.
I remember talking to him a few times after 9/11 happened. He said, that's why we're here. We're going to take care of this. We're here to protect.
We believed that we existed for a war, and we were looking for one. So when this one showed up on our doorstep, we were more than ready to go. And I felt extremely privileged to be one of the very first people to go. I was injured on August 12th of 2004. I was on on what we call a sniper stay-behind mission, where we would hide out in an area that was bad as snipers and then see what the enemy did, not knowing that we were there. We were there to interdict some enemy that were creating a lot of trouble in the green zone of Baghdad. And we had an idea where they were launching their rockets and mortars from, so we went in, snuck into that area and hid out there. Since we had already kind of gotten up on the roof to position ourselves to attack these guys, we were somewhat exposed. And we figured it would be a matter of time before someone who saw us would shoot at us. Right at that time, a bad guy with a grenade popped up on the roof adjacent to us and perfectly threw a grenade that I saw coming in, and it was going to land right in the center of us. My plan was to try to get off the platform I was on, which was on a section of expanded metal over a set of air conditioning units. So I just pushed a little harder and I jumped and cleared over him and thought, well, I'm just gonna ride this down to the roof. And yeah, it just didn't work out. So when I hit the roof, my perception was immediately that there was an explosion. That stunned me, and then a moment later, there was another explosion, and that one sounded a little more muffled. It was just kind of chaos. There was, there was the fragments from the grenade and smoke and tissue. I got up on my feet and tried to step in the direction of where I had just jumped off. When I took a step, my right leg bent at an L. I was in denial, actually, when it happened. I think I thought I could buff it out somehow. So I reached down, I grabbed my leg, and I straightened it out. It's like as soon as I saw that, the pain caught up, and the pain, I just can't even describe what that felt like. I was laying on my back, I was shocked to see my buddy's face pop over and look at me. He said, okay, well, I've got one guy up here, and he's hurt really bad. About 4 guys grabbed him and just drug him ahead of me towards the doorway. I needed something to break the traction of my body armor on the gravelly roof. I remember, being a kid on a slip and slide, and I literally got in this guy's blood trail. So I drugged myself inside the stairwell, and there was a set of stairs and a landing and a set of stairs again that I had to go down. So I positioned myself there. I had signs that I was bleeding internally. I could tell I was just felt weak. I just remember explosion after explosion after explosion.
His mom and I could kind of feel it coming. And I was out kayaking with a really close friend of mine, and I looked over at her and I did say, I thought my husband was coming home in a coffin. That
ended up 90% amputating my right leg at the knee. The only thing that maintained the leg on me was the skin.
And when he called me and he was wounded, I said, well, obviously it's not that bad, but how bad is it? And he was like, how do you know? And I'm like, I could feel it.
On the 19th, I had my first surgery here in the United States. I ended up having another surgery and doing rehabilitation and having to learn how to walk again and all of that over the winter of 04-05. People always talk about the courage that, SEALs have when they go and do stuff, but I think it takes a lot more courage to see somebody that I guess that you love almost die. There was this incident that really started to define, at least for me, the distance between those of us who were, as a career, fighting to protect people in the United States and the people that were enjoying that freedom. And it happened on Election Day of 2004. I probably shouldn't have been driving that early, but I wanted to do it for myself as a statement. I wanted to drive myself to the polling place, cast my ballot, and get home. That's probably not all the energy I had. It wasn't long after I'd had my second surgery, and I had a lot of surgical staples still and 2 big lines on my leg. Came back from the polling place, and as I'm heading home, I thought, I'm going to do myself one better. I'm going to stop. I'm going to get myself a cup of coffee, and I'm going to go home. So I ordered my coffee. A little funny exchange. Some guy that I didn't know overheard it, and he engaged me in a conversation, and he says to me,
So you voted?
Yeah, I did. How about you?
Yeah, I voted.
I was thinking this guy was just doing the, hey, we'll keep the politics out of it, and just, you and I voted. His next statement, it almost knocked me off my feet, was,
There is no Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
I said, it's not true. And I felt betrayed in the conversation. Eventually I got to the place where I just said to him, the problem is that you think your opinion matters as much as mine. And on this particular subject, it's never going to. You think about that, like how cool would it have been for a guy with crutches and his leg weeping, sap from a recent surgery, to just jack that guy one, Of course, everybody sues everybody now, so it's probably not a good thing to do, but the world might have been a better place if you'd have walked into a fist that day. You just never know. I started wondering, what are we doing? Why are so many of us going back over and over again for people that can't just enjoy that liberty that they have? Why do they have to take it to the next level and act like they're just as entitled to speak on the same level with the people that are out there doing the sacrificing? And so it started to harden my heart a little bit, and I noticed it with my buddies. We're having the same experiences as we talked amongst each other. I was on deck to deploy in June of '05 and did redeploy back to the war. So less than a year after having my right leg 90% amputated, I went back to the fight. But when you retire, then you're kind of empty. You're like, what do I do? What am I supposed to do? And I think over the years, I started dwelling on the loss, thinking about my friends that died either in training or in combat, and all the guys that were hurt, and what that really means, what that sacrifice meant.
It was hurting so bad, he said, I want to do something to try and ease this pain.
So what I wanted to do was commemorate the day differently and sort of use a martial arts type thing where somebody directs energy at you, and if you can time that energy properly, you can direct it right back at them just as bad as they sent it to you. So I started thinking about numbers, and I started thinking about making it matter so people could find lots of detail in what I did. And I thought, well, what if I shot a target from 911 yards on 9/11 and started shooting that target right at the time that the first tower was hit, and do it in order of death for every one of the guys that we lost post 9/11 up until that date of 9/11 of 2012. The 2 guys that actually ran what we call the butts or the pits, where the target goes up and down, and the guys that actually checked the hole in the target, they were both former Naval Special Warfare support personnel, so they had worked in SEAL teams in some support capacity sometime in their life.
When Dave calls and says, hey, I got an idea, I'm like, yeah.
He said, I could do something. I've read the 9/11 report, and we kind of know from that investigation what the terrorists were doing.
I work for a company that has some technology that he thought might help.
And he says, to help us get in the mood for how heavy this is and what we're doing, he volunteered to send text messages out to all of us that were involved in this, saying what those people did. But it really did add something, to be laying in bed, getting ready to get up and have your phone blast, and you have a text, and you see what happened on the morning of 9/11 prior to, the attacks. So all the way down, I'm packing the car with the weapon and the ammunition and supplies, and Tracy and I are driving down, and both of our phones go up.
And it was one of those things where you really started to understand the enormity and the impact.
In a sense, I wanted to see, could we steal the day back? You know, do we have to let them define the day? You had that sense of a fuse burning almost. The things start coming more and more closely. You know, report such and such an airplane isn't responding, report such and such a plane is you know, been taken over. By then I'm on the gun, we're on the yard line. We were timing the first shot that would be for Neil Roberts to go at 8:46, which would have been the impact of the first airplane. Everything kind of gathered up into that moment, and then the shot. They recorded every time I fired and hit the target. They knew what shot that was, what time it was, and then where it landed on the target. I just shot, and if I hit the target, then they would tell me who it was for. I could hear it over the radio. Sometimes as a sniper, you know when you just know. You're like, yeah, that's a good shot. That's a really good shot. And I felt that. And you also know it's a good shot when the second you break that shot, you see from 911 yards away, you see that target frame go down. I said to Tracy, I go, that was a good shot. And you know what? That was for Danny Dietz, wasn't it?
Danny was not just a warrior that fought for our country, but he was a wonderful person. His laugh and pranks is something the guys remember vividly about him.
I felt it. I said, I'm gonna tell you something else. I said, that thing's gonna be the closest shot to the target.
As we were saying bye, he leaned over the window and gave me a kiss, and tears just started rolling down my cheeks, and he wiped them off and said, it's only 3 months, and I'll be home. And just remember when you get down and sad, I'm doing something special for my country.
They put the target back up and reported, you know, impact for Danny Dietz, you know, about an inch away or less from the X. He could have been anywhere in that. There's not really a way I could have known. I felt he was there.
I realized that it wasn't about me, it wasn't about him, it wasn't about us. It was about the freedom of our country and the things that needed to be done to avoid evil to come back to our shores. He just lived life to the fullest until his last breath.
The guys at the butt said, listen, there's some stuff going on down here. You need to come down here and see it. I was really worried that something had happened to the target. Like what? What can't you tell me over the radio that I have to get in the car and drive 900 yards down to see?
We drove down and looked at the target, and there were two holes right near each other.
There were a couple of guys that I had known in the teams that they were killed together on the same night.
I thought how crazy that was, that their bullet holes were right by each other. I couldn't have made that happen if I'd wanted to.
They knew who the rounds were for. They were for Nate Hardy and Michael Koch. There had been this long string of success, me just nailing it. I was in my groove. I mean, it's probably the longest part of the whole event where I was in my groove. And then all of a sudden, I miss. But I just miss. I mean, it was teasingly just outside of the target. Elevation was perfect. So I thought, okay, no big deal. So I made my slight wind adjustment. I fire again. Now I'm teasingly just off the target, but on the opposite side of where the miss was. And I'm like, the heck? So I do it again, and back and forth. And I think there was a period of like 6 minutes there, which represent a whole lot more than 6 bullets, because I really felt I was on it. I was in that groove, nailing the thing. And I look at Tracy and I go, who am I shooting this for? She goes, Jeff Lucas. And then I was like, say no more.
They had the life they had while they were with the guys on deployment, and the father, the husband, and the best friend. And for me, it was more always the calming factor, the rock.
Jeff was a friend of mine, and in life, he was probably one of the most prolific practical jokers I'd ever known. He was definitely considered a very funny man.
The jokester side of Jeff, I'm getting to experience it now.
I think at that point, I started to think that there's only so much I can do with the equipment. There's only so much I can do with my skill level. But ultimately, once I've done my best calculations and I break that shot, that bullet leaves the gun. And from the time it passes the crown of the muzzle, it's in the atmosphere. And, you know, if there was something that could influence where that bullet ended up, maybe that's where they had the influences, in the atmosphere. I was pretty exhausted at the end of the day, and Jason said, you know, we saw some weird stuff down there. And he said, I think it's just important to capture this. Let's just capture this. So he made a graph, It had every bullet by bullet, what time it was fired, what the interval was between it and the last shot, where it landed on the target. And he said, because I just have this sense, I have this weird feeling that these numbers will mean, if they don't mean anything to us, obviously, they might mean something to the families. And that became incorporated on the back of the art, actually.
I think when you're part of the military, it's much more than a job. It is a lifestyle. They get some spark that gets ignited with them. Some of them had a dream to become a SEAL, and they had that gene that said, I'm not going to quit. You have to be committed to it all the time. And I think sometimes that's why maybe there's a disconnect between the civilian population and the military. You have the hat when you come home and you try and be a good father and neighbor and brother. And then when it's time to go back and do your job, you take off the civilian hat and put back on your war helmet and you go out and do what you've been trained to do.
I got involved with a wounded wear remodel project.
We bid on one of the auction items at Jay's Toast to the Heroes event.
Dave and Tracy had won a bathroom remodel. I came onto the project about mid-project. I had just come to work for VB Homes, and that project was about halfway completed.
When I have strange people in the house, I try to sanitize the house as much as possible so that they don't really know my background or what I do.
Well, I had noticed just some of the paraphernalia around the house, military-related stuff and gun-related stuff. I had learned that Dave was a vet, and he had been wounded in action. I just broke the ice and said, hey, my brother's an artist and does pistol target art.
Immediately it was like, well, that's kind of convenient. I'm thinking to myself, this guy just walks down. How does he know I'm even doing something with targets?
As an artist, you're always looking for something original. You're looking for that thing that you do that you can really call your own. My brother gifted me with a little set of paints, and that really got the ball rolling for me. And I'm self-taught, so I didn't go to school, and I would just play around with all different styles. And my dad kind of exposed me to targets by going to shoot his gun with them one day. So that's kind of what started the whole target thing. It just took right off. People started buying it immediately.
I find his website, and immediately the first thing I see, I'm like, I recognized one of the art pieces because I was a fan of that show, Californication.
Art warehouses work directly with film productions and TV productions, and the art directors for these productions go to these resource houses. So that's how I ended up on any film or TV.
Yeah, so he said he thought his brother might be into it.
Dave contacted me online and told me he was thinking about doing this tribute project in connection with wounded wear.
I had no idea what his attitude was towards the military, towards the war. Would he be offended if I even asked?
I said, absolutely, I'd love to work with you on that.
I think that was an important part for me, was giving that target after I did all that work to do my part and to put it in a tube and overnight ship it to him and say, I trust you to make art out of this that will honor these guys. I was trying to overcome that fear of giving what I had done to Woody and just trusting him.
I had a sense of where I was going to go with this as soon as he made it known to me what he had in mind. I had been saving front pages from the New York and LA Times for over 12 years, and I had all the front pages from both those papers for the entire week of 9/11. I mean, they're so emotionally charged. I actually burned those holes larger so that the red paint in the background, they would be more visible. The red halo draws the target into a more human dimension.
Dave wanted Woody to have the latitude to use his artistic talent to really capture what that artwork represented. And it was pretty amazing when the artwork was done and we saw the original pictures and how he had used the newspaper articles that had covered those 10 years and these significant moments that occurred since 9/11.
It's so immediate. I mean, here you have this visceral, physical element, a bullet hole in a target and the name of someone who was alive once, who's no longer with us, right next to that hole. Not only the ones I could see on the target as I was working with it, but later on when I was working with those names and arranging them in this bar across the bottom of the piece was just really intense, because you can't not think about, who that name belonged to.
Heath was my firstborn, and with that being said, he taught me and I taught him. We learned from one another, and he was a caregiver. He loved life. When he would enter a room, his smile would light it up.
All the things that he did, he kind of was very focused and driven to become a SEAL. You know, so the swimming, the biking, the running. He loved to shoot, and he just was driven in that direction.
So not a lot of people know it, but my father wasn't initially supposed to be on the helicopter. And while they were passing overhead, one of the Chinooks was shot down, killing all men on board, including my dad. If I could have the world know one thing about my father, it was that he was a great family man. He was a great family man to his brotherhood, to the SEALs, and he was a great family man to his children, his wife.
Tom wasn't a chatty Cathy. He did not talk at length. We talked on the phone for like an hour and a half. And I was driving back, it was late, it was beautiful, it was cold, it had been snowing, it was a beautiful night sky. And I remember a shooting star. I saw it in on the windshield and I was like, oh my gosh, a shooting star, hold on. And I made a wish. And the last thing I told Tom was that I loved him. The last thing he told me was that I love you, kiss the kids, I love them. And he got up, went to work that night, and he didn't come home. That was the last thing I said to him. I didn't have to tell him that, he already knew, you know?
And then he had his daughter, and this beautiful little daughter. And this picture just says so much for me. The last time we got to spend with Jason was 4th of July, 2008. We came in to visit. And he was getting ready to deploy, so he was packing up. We were taking Jasmine back to Michigan. And Jason came, he put her in the seat and buckled her in. And the look on his face was as though it was the last time he was ever going to see her again. He just had that look, and maybe he had that calling that he was not coming home for Mystic One.
Yeah.
And I'll never, ever forget that look on his face when he saw his baby daughter leaving.
These are his last words, written 13 days before he passed. If you are reading this, things didn't work out the way I planned. I'm typing this up because I'm too lazy to write it out by hand, and that way I can change it when I need to. Where to start? Okay. My life was short, but a great one. If I died doing something with the teams, then I died doing the greatest job in working with the most talented, hardworking, and the greatest group of warriors ever to walk this earth. I've made more memories and had greater experiences than 10 normal people. Put together. Most people get to choose how they live, but not how they die. And I consider myself blessed for that. So, do not feel sorry for me. I made the choice consciously, and I wouldn't trade it for anything, and I would do it over in a second. It's better to die on your feet than live on your knees. I've tried to embrace that idea, and I fought for what I believed in. My country, my family, and mostly for the brotherhood of men who fought alongside me. So take a minute, be sad, and move on. Have a drink for me, be happy, and try to remember the good times. You can't change it either way, so you might as well enjoy it. Those are his words, not mine.
I usually arrive at a name for a piece near completion, and I'll either know by the time it's complete or during the process it'll come to me, but I wasn't really sure how I was gonna figure out a title for it, and when it was finally over, my eye kept coming back to that line on that front page.
It was an article that just says, a small town gives until it hurts.
And as I would think about the names and think about all the loss involved in that, I just kept coming back to Until It Hurts on that front page.
It spiderwebs out because as you look at these newspaper articles that capture these battles that have occurred throughout from 2001 on to the present day, you know, the name of the article was The Town That Gave Until It Hurts. After this small town that lost, you know, so many of its sons.
To him, I think we all felt like we'd worked on the art until it hurts. And I think that whether you're a Gold Star family member or a former teammate of one of these guys, I think everybody can look at that piece of art and say, yeah, Until It Hurts kind of fits.
We had gotten ourselves into a bad situation, and I recognized it. The enemy had moved in a field, and we were seeing movement about 100 yards away. I took my team, and we moved into this field. It was incredibly dense vegetation. We didn't know how many there were. We got word from the AC-130 gunship, hey, you need to turn. You're going to miss some of the guys that they could still see. When we made that turn, several of our guys on our left flank actually didn't make the turn, so we got separated. There was almost no moonlight that night. I was on the right flank with 5 other guys, and as we started to step out, 2 of my guys literally stepped on top of an enemy fighter and immediately engaged him, which started the entire firefight. 2 PKM machine guns immediately started firing on all of us from 2 different positions. Rounds were hitting all around me. I could hear the sonic cracks of bullets as they were going by all around me. And that's when I took the first rounds across the body and 2 in the arm. I couldn't get the tourniquet on just because I'd already lost so much blood from my arm wound that I was getting weak. I tried to get up and move back to this one point of cover, and that's when they opened up on me again, and I took a round through the face. And suddenly I didn't feel any pain anymore. I reached up and I touched my face, and I could feel my fingers really entered. All I could see was the darkness, the wetness. I realized in that moment I'm really messed up. And I remember laying flat on my back when that first fire mission came in. I could feel the ground shake. Literally the ground in front of me was saturated with 25mm machine gun rounds. The road to recovery for a wounded warrior is a tough thing. You know, I probably would have been done in 15 surgeries, but because I had so many infection problems, it actually took almost 40 surgeries to put me back together. And I remember asking the doctor in those first couple of weeks, you know, hey, doc, hurry up and put me back together. You know, I got things to do. I need to get back to my team. And I'll never forget the look on that doctor's face. I was like, how long is this going to take? Weeks, months? And she just shook her head at me and she said, we're talking years. And I told myself, hey, this is medical buds. And you're just going to take it one evolution at a time, and you're going to drive forward and then go to the next evolution. And I had some family members that came into the room, and they were pretty upset with what they saw, and understandably so. But at the same time, it almost started to get to a moment where I felt like there was pity. And I decided in that moment that I would never have anybody feel sorry for me. And I wrote out this sign that said, attention to all who enter here. If you're coming in this room with sadness or sorrow, don't bother. The wounds that I received, I got in a job that I love, doing it for people that I love, defending the freedom of a country that I deeply love. I'll make a full recovery. What is full? That's the absolute utmost I have the ability to recover. And then I'll push that about 20% further through sheer mental tenacity. This room you're about to enter is a room of fun, optimism, and intense rapid regrowth. If you're not prepared for that, go elsewhere. About a day later, a friend of mine came by, and it was up on a big, bright orange piece of poster board, and he tacked his trident into the door on the bottom, and from there it went viral.
When you're faced with a bad injury, you know, even people around you, other SEALs sometimes, can make life plans for you. You know, oh, of course, you'll never do this again. And when you're in that position, when you're the injured guy, that's the last thing you want to hear.
Anger and frustration will drive people to do things.
But if you have the right attitude about it, you know, you can take that and turn it around and do something that's both tangible and intangible.
I was traveling across the country between Baltimore, Johns Hopkins, and up to Chicago for my surgery. So I'd be flying all the time, and I used to talk about it, you know, here I go again into the land of stares and gawks. One day I finally got tired of it. I got tired of people staring. I got tired of people assuming I'd been in a motorcycle accident or a car accident. And at this point, we've been at war for 6 years and not thinking about that, you know, hey, these severe injuries that you see that I'm carrying happen on the battlefield fighting for your freedom. So I went home that night and I got on one of these make-your-own t-shirt websites, and I created some t-shirts that said, hey, stop staring. I got shot for your freedom. Just say thank you. Stop staring. I got shot by a machine gun. It would have killed you.
Instead of me feeling like there's something wrong with me, I'm gonna put something on my shirt that makes you think maybe there's something wrong with you. So I think he made a t-shirt that said, I got shot with a machine gun. What did your dad do for our country, or something like that?
I put an American flag on the back, and I called it wounded wear. And I started wearing them everywhere I went. And I had friends that saw them, and they said, you know, you're on to something here. You're not the only one that feels this way.
Guys go, wounded wear. I got bags when I got shot or blown up. I ended up getting the clothing bag from wounded wear. They got something that meant something, whether it's an education or this clothing, but that clothing and that education also have the intangible of continuance, or in the case, it sounds silly, but when you're a wounded guy and somebody gives you some specialized clothing that has some, you know, logo on it or something that you connect with, you think, hey, somebody out there actually cares, somebody actually gives a shit.
That artwork represents the American sacrifice as it occurred since 2001. And we took it to Toast to the Heroes in 2012. And we hung it in the room, and I watched families of the fallen, these wives of guys I had served with that I knew there was power in it. There was a spiritual essence to this artwork, and I watched as they'd reach out and they'd touch it, and they'd shine a flashlight, and they could see their husband's name written on the target. And in that moment, I realized how real it was.
Nothing, I think, impacted me or prepared me for seeing them go up and touch the hole on the original art for their son or father or husband. And that intimate contact, I think, completed that effect that I had with the performance art piece of it. What Woody did, giving that civilian perception of the loss to the total artwork. And when you see people reaching out and touching a finger to it and making that final connection, and that's the hole that was shot for my son or my father or my dad.
I remember some Gold Star families looking and gasping, yeah, at the number or the location.
You can't stand in front of that thing and look at it and not just be captivated.
When I look at the art now, I see the power in it. And most people can't understand it until they come see it. There's an aura about the art, and it's because it represents these 79 men who are willing to give their lives for the freedom of this country.
Thought that somehow each family affected in the background was the reason that the names at the bottom are there. That resonates with pride. It resonates with pain.
It's my son's story. It's all those other names. It's every man and woman who's given their life for our country. It's their stories. Their stories need to be told.
It's so deep. It should be three-dimensional and it would go on forever. It is by far pain, pride, and love for every person on that, every piece.
When I heard the story behind it and then the shots for each of the fallen, I'm very touched. I think it's amazing that someone would be that dedicated to think of these guys in that way, and it's just so powerful.
It very much brought me back to that day, to what happened to our country, how we were attacked. And then I went to the bottom and started to read the names, and didn't realize that, there were the names of all of our fallen SEALs that were on there, and obviously saw my son's name. A very proud moment, but again, a tearful moment. As a parent, it is one of the most strange things to see your child's name on a granite wall, or in a book, or in a movie.
The title says it all. He fired until it hurts. Sometimes it hurts for me to look at it.
Here are our heroes, our real heroes. Their names are here.
One of the great things about the art is it takes all these guys' lives, guys that we were friends with, guys we served with, guys our wives hung out with their wives and our kids hung out with their kids. And I think the American public gets this mythical view of the SEAL teams, and some of these movies and some of even the books out there, I think, buy into that. But the reality is they're men, they're husbands and brothers and fathers and sons, and they're human.
Tom and I willingly chose to sacrifice our family for millions and millions of other people.
I don't think that the general population of the United States has an appreciation for the sacrifices that the men and women of our armed forces are making.
Sacrifice means a lot of things, and in the teams, you sacrifice so much of your time and your health. Why do you want to be a SEAL?
Todd Grubbs, a gentleman that I had began to develop a friendship with, was just a great patriot. He was a great example of American who had achieved the American dream. He was successful, but he understood from being in this area the sacrifice that so many people had made to enable what he had.
In life, you can't do everything, but you can do one thing. You can live a life of purpose and serve others. It's free. I had a customer, a friend of 20 years, ask me one day to donate some gift certificates to a nonprofit organization, and her name was Brenda Day, and I'd known her for 20 years and just part of that community. And then a couple days later, Stephanie's like, hey, there's a motorcycle ride this Sunday, why don't you go do it? And it was a Wounded Wear poker run motorcycle rally, and the gift certificates that I had donated, not knowing where I donated them to, was actually at this Wounded Wear event.
So he started coming out to quite a few of our events, and he started sponsoring, he started doing a lot of stuff.
And then one day I'm in my business, and if anybody knows Jason, he walks with a bebop. He's, he's coming. And I looked out and I saw this guy coming through the parking lot, and he's kind of bebopping along, and he gets closer to the door, and I'm like, holy, crap, that's Jason Redman. And he walks in and walks up, and he's bigger than life to me at that point, and he's like, hey man, I just want to tell you thanks for donating to my organization and wanted to come by and meet me.
So at this event that we had the artwork, the auction started going live, and it started going higher and higher and higher.
She kept bidding on it at the auction that we went to. It was done electronically, so at about a certain dollar mark, I looked down and my wife was continually bidding. She was actually bidding against Dave and his wife.
Suddenly this piece of artwork went for $17,500. And I find out that Todd and his wife Stephanie were the ones who won it.
And I just kept going.
It's done.
I think
Tell me to
you know,
stop, so
I think it was a larger purpose. It didn't have to do about money at that point for me. It was like, there's a reason why I met Jason Redman, and there's a reason why Wounded Wear came in our life. And I had gone from, being an employee to an employer, and went from making an average income to doing really well in life just through hard work. But I hadn't marked off that box where I was giving back.
at the event, like he talked about, seeing the art, sitting there and knowing the story, and just, we kept our space because there were so many family members up at the art. It didn't feel appropriate to be that close with them, but watching them, touch the art and talk about their loved ones, and they weren't sad about it. They weren't crying. They were proud, and they were honored that their husband or father or brother was on the artwork. As a civilian, and I didn't know anyone personally that passed away in 9/11, but we were all, whether we had someone there or not, we were all devastated. And to not, like you talked about, that closure. So good all day. Here's something now. Why am I feeling this pain every year at 9/11? Why am I having all this anger? I didn't know those people, but it was all of us. Every single one of us was touched. And so now we have this art that we can touch and see.
When the art was bought by a civilian, it was actually probably the best thing that happened, because Todd started to communicate to me how much that art meant to him, and the dialogue that it was opening up when he would show it to friends and house guests, and they started having this. I started realizing that something about that art took us back to the place. Some people call it 9/12, that day after 9/11, where Americans agreed on things.
The art is also about, bridging the gap between people and a celebration of life. And, or that's how I've heard it. And from the time you've made it till today, that piece of art has touched a lot of people that you can't possibly ever meet. And I've been privileged to that because of this Facebook page.
I think it's more important that it went to a civilian family, and the reason why is I think that these gaps that have divided us as a nation between those who have served multiple times in a lot of instances, and people that are just enjoying the privilege of being in America without having sacrificed in that way. These gaps have been forming over the last dozen years or so between us, and those aren't good.
Because of all the collaboration of all of us involved, and everyone's ideas, and everyone coming and saying, how can we generate this bigger, like this wave, and the relationships that we formed. Our friend Pasquale in New York lost his two best friends in 9/11, and he couldn't go anywhere near it. He couldn't
Still hasn't been
have the conversation. He couldn't even begin to think about having the conversation. And our friendship started because this art enabled him to suddenly be able to talk about it again.
Am I a New Yorker? Yeah, I guess I'm a New Yorker. I guess you could say that. It was a dark day, because nobody ever expected that, and let alone to lose your friends that day. So it was a tough day. It was a really tough day. Joe Vigiano, a New York City police officer, and his brother John Vigiano, a New York City fireman. They both responded that day to the towers, and both ultimately were killed. I truly believe has been with me every step of the way from after the 11th. And just a really great guy, unbelievable guy, and became a New York City cop because of that day, and because of him. And it was Just give me a second.
He was angry. He sent me an email on our message over Facebook, and I'm sure he'll tell the story differently, but he in his New York accent. But he basically just said, you know, what the blank is this thing? And I explained it to him a little bit. A couple of days go by, and then all of a sudden I get this message. It's really, really long, and it was a very angry message about all the things that had occurred for him. And I literally said to him in the message back, I was like, you know, yeah, I understand how you can be mad at the person in front of you because their coffee's not hot enough. I got it. But if you let them win, then you're never going to be able to overcome this anger. You've got to learn to love again. And I don't think I'd ever said that to anybody in my life. And it just kind of came out, and I'm like, send. And I didn't even know who he was. And he sent me this email back, and he's like, man, you're right. And from that point forward, he's done some things in his life that's changed his life, and he's completely changed his life.
You know, at the time, yeah, I was angry. I was, you know, still pissed. I was pissed off. I was pissed off I wasn't a cop anymore. I was pissed off that of the attack to our country and the many sacrifices made by many. But it just, at that point, it just took me to a whole different level, which I didn't know at the time. I was just so focused on that piece of art and still focused on the towers because it just brought me back to that day.
So this is the first time you've been back down here officially?
Up, pretty much up close. I've driven past it, but never haven't been this close. The only time was I took Joe's family on a 10-year anniversary, but none of this was here. The only thing that was there was the skeletons or the framework of that building there. But other than that, not to see it, you know, not to be up this close.
One of the things that Dave said that compelled me to buy the art was that, you know, when they create a common ground where, you know, bringing civilians and veterans together and kind of reset the day 9/11, I think that me and you being here captures that.
Me and you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the art.
Yeah. Navy Special Warfares went to war the day the towers fell.
That's right.
Well, I didn't know that. And I think you look at this 13 years later that, you know, the men on this art fought for something that was real to me. So I'd like to thank you for your friendship.
Thank you, bro. I look at this art and it's made for the sole purpose of bringing, I feel, people who have served to people like me, an ordinary person or ordinary people, and it's just you don't want to forget their sacrifices.
It's the ability to enable yourself to reverse it, right? To take that horrible energy from that 9/11 and to take that, how that affects you personally, and do something positive and reverse it.
The Gold Star family, whether it be the spouse, the mother, the father, or the child, they are the Gold Star family member of their fallen hero. I started volunteering for children who have lost a parent in line of duty, Gold Star children. I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the community. I felt very powerful being able to help them, to empower the children like me. I know what it's like to have lost their father. I know what they're going through, and I know the trials and tribulations that they'll have to endure. And Because I have that perspective already, I'm ahead of the game. And I feel like I ultimately have a greater responsibility to prepare them for that. And so if that means building relationships and empowering them, giving them a voice, showing them that other people care about them, or just giving them resources and tools that will help them.
Probably the most important thing to the Gold Star families is we don't want anyone to ever forget our loved one. We want them to know their name, where they were from, how old they were, did they have a sense of humor, you know, were they quirky, what were their favorite memories of who they were.
As parents, I think one of your worst fears is your son's going to be forgotten. And, you know, to be able to see that, and it's not just, don't forget the guys whose names are on that, because there's so many more out there. And one of the things we've talked about is all the support we got after Pat died. I mean, the SEALs were, the community just surrounded us and wrapped their arms around us.
I think, as it's titled, Until It Hurts, I want people to understand that there is a huge pain that is carried by the families of those who've sacrificed their lives for this country. I want people to never forget what happened to us on 9/11 as a nation when we were attacked. And never forget those men and women that said, we will stand up. We will stand for this country. We will defend her and those that we love.
The thing that's really interesting about it is the money that's spent, if somebody buys a reproduction, goes back to Wounded Wear and organizations that directly impact the lives of people who were affected by war. Some child who lost his father, it may in part have his college paid for by somebody purchasing the art or by collectively people buying the art. And I think that kind of completes that circle of taking the negative energy and doing something positive with it.
There's so much depth to what is actually in there. There's so much depth to the 79 men who were willing to live greatly, who were willing to go out there and sacrifice for all these different Americans so that you could have the freedom that you enjoy every day. And I hope that this documentary will capture their stories. It'll capture the story of the families they left behind.
And I'm always in awe how this whole thing is reaching out to people, and people are getting involved in ways that I guess I couldn't have even imagined.
It's almost like there's this wave, and the wave has crested, and it's fallen down, and now the waters are stilling. But like Todd said, there's this whole group of people that are hurting. The families, the men and women who have been hurt, and now either they are or they aren't still in service, but they're still hurting.
Maybe it's all about release, and surrender and letting life happen.
We should all feel towards our brothers and sisters who fall to preserve our freedoms. We should never forget those Gold Stars, and we should always share the message of what the Gold Star family represents to this country. Never, ever let their sacrifices ever fade. Behind every hero, behind every warrior, is a family that is grieving. The grieving never ends. All of this came from your head to a rifle, to a bullet, to a target.
At least every shot was worth it, because you hit all 79 times. You hit 79 shots on the board, on the target. So you recognize 79 fallen Navy SEALs.
That bridge that Dave's wanted to put in place, and that one that Todd's wanted to put in place, and all the people that are behind the film, for me, I see that bridge. All right, and hopefully this documentary will bring that bridge even closer to everybody else's heart that sees it. And I'm sure it will happen. I miss my son. Just like anybody whose son's name's on there, they miss him too.
Well, first of all, I would say that I really love you and I miss you, but you're doing the right thing and I appreciate that. I'm mad that we didn't get to spend as much time as we could have, but I'm happy we got to spend as much time as we did. Even though I can't see you physically, you'll always be my dad, and I'm glad you are.
The reason we purchased this, and I want to kind of see it to the end. I mean, I think the documentary does that, but I think this is one stepping stone for this thing to do somewhere else.
I feel it's my duty, growing up in this country, with all the opportunities and all the freedoms I've been given, I want to be able to preserve those for the next generation, and I want to do it in the most elite way I can. In a brotherhood where you will die for the man to your left or your right without any hesitation.
We're kind of at this one point in time, you know, we're sort of at two paths intersecting. You know, you're kind of left of what I did, and I'm getting a lot further down that path, unfortunately. But it's kind of nice to have those paths intermeet and share this moment for a little bit. The SEAL Trident is one of the only emblems in the U.S. military where the eagle's head is bowed. And the reason why is, even with all of the fantastic ability we have and power, we try to be humble. Humility is important. Pride will get you killed. Pride has you losing focus of what you're doing. And anyways, so when you begin training one day, they're going to give you a white t-shirt and tell you to put your name on it. And you have to earn your brown t-shirt by getting through Hell Week. But this is your starter shirt. So if you do choose to go that route, that's your first goal, is to be able to get in a class where they let you wear that thing and form up with the other guys.
Appreciate it.
All right?
Thank you.
I wish you luck, man.
Thanks.
I think having it come at its core from a SEAL with my background and getting it to a civilian to process is, I think, one of the reasons why the art is powerful when people look at it. It's not a memorial. It's not woe is me. It's not a headstone. That art's not a headstone.
Here I stand, there's blood on my hands, fighting by my brother's side in this foreign land, 'cause I protect this flag. It's been so long since I've been home, I don't remember when I left a piece of me never to get back again. I'll protect this flag. Through the pain, through the fight, I'll be with you every time out the wide. I got your back, even if I bleed. Just know you